All right, cheers, guys. Let's see what this is about. Cheers. Cheers.
My lord. The guanciale is so amazingly crispy.
The pasta is great, but screw the pasta. Just give me a bowl of the guanciales, and I'll eat that straight. I don't even care.
I actually really like the pasta because they have that like peppery flavor. It's creamy.
Honestly, one of my favorites so far.
All right, well there you go, guys. Let's see what they have for 2010.
Now, the very next pasta, we took creativity to its max. And if you really want to give it a try, you're definitely going to have to make it yourself, because you won't be able to find this one anywhere. Now, to make it, it's not as complicated as you think. However, you do need a few special ingredients. Starting off with the cheese, a truffle cheese. So the first thing to do is to open it up. You want to go ahead and remove the cover, and immediately start creating crevices with the cheese. Don't worry though, because nothing is going to go to waste. We're going to be using this to make our sauce as well. Once I was done, check it out. It is our serving plate. For the pasta, I'll be using spaghetti. I just follow the instructions in the package, like always. Because next up, instead of guanciale, this is the real king of all meats, Wagyu. Oh yes. Now, just like guanciale, this has a tremendous amount of fat, and I'll be using it exactly the same way. The first thing to do is to cut it in small strips. Then into a pan it goes to cook up and render that fat. I season it with salt and pepper and continue cooking it until it was nice and crispy. Oh yes. Then into another pan, I went ahead and used that Wagyu fat, threw my spaghetti in there, added a generous amount of pasta water, tossed the whole thing up, and added that cheese that we previously carved. You want to go ahead and toss it as much as possible, because the more you do, the creamier it gets. But we're not done yet, because I went ahead and carved some more cheese from the bowl, as then I added some flaming bourbon. This helps the cheese melt. Once I got a nice creamy texture, I went ahead and added my pasta, tossed the whole thing up together. As to finish it up, I'll be using this, black truffles. Shout out to my mushroom dealer. The link will be on the description, because he not only hooked me up with this, but also that beautiful cheese. So I went ahead and shaved a generous amount on top of the cheese, followed by some crispy pieces of Wagyu, and that is an invention that Italians might not approve, but something you should definitely try. Wagyu and pasta together. It is, in my opinion, a perfect combination.
Cheers, everybody. Cheers. Wonderfully creamy pasta. And it feels like the sauce isn't too overpowering at all. I know I said I wasn't a huge fan of truffle. It still has a little bit of a hint, but it's not as overpowering as I would have expected.
The saltiness from the Wagyu definitely helps the truffle-ness. You would think it'd be a little bit too rich mixed with the creaminess of the pasta, but work really well together.
It's just really nice. You can really enjoy everything to the max. Absolutely. I give this a 10 out of 10. And with that being said, guys, that's a wrap for 100 years of pasta.
I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care, buddy. Bye-bye.
You know that music, don't you? It's iconic. The title theme from The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. It's also the whistle music from the original Legend of Zelda. And yet, it's more than that. It's familiar, but new. The melody's played more than once, and the second time, it is slightly different. The arrangement is fuller, more lush with piano and ocarina. It's ultimately more realized with segments which are entirely different from what came before. It is, to my mind, a good metaphor for Ocarina of Time itself. This is a game that is at once a true amalgamation of all Zelda games which came before it, while still being something completely new and not seen in the series before. This unique blend would result in it becoming the best-selling Zelda game at the time of its release, and a beloved classic which some have deemed the best video game ever made. Its influence can't be denied, but it is occasionally overstated. This season of Legendary Adventures podcast is all about The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Each episode will explore a dungeon and my gameplay leading up to that dungeon. Then we'll take a look at the game world and the legacy of Ocarina of Time. My name is Paul Riley. I'm a Zelda fan exploring the evolution of the Zelda series by playing through each mainline game in release order. That means I'm not including spin-offs or multiplayer releases. So let's begin Season 5 and our journey through Ocarina of Time. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was released on November 21st, 1998. It was the first game in the series to appear on the Nintendo 64, and the first game in the series to be made in full 3D. Its origins, however, predate the Nintendo 64. We actually have to take a second and travel back in time to 1987, and the second game in the series, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. Zelda 2 was the focus of the second season of this podcast. You'll recall the game is largely a departure from the original game. It's presented primarily in a side-scrolling style rather than from an overhead view. It also had a big emphasis on sword combat. Zelda 2 started with Zelda creator Shigeru Miyamoto's desire to create a sword fighting game. The decision to turn it into a Legend of Zelda game did not come until after the initial prototypes were made. Zelda 2 was a hit, but Miyamoto himself wasn't entirely satisfied with it. Years later, he would express some disappointment in Zelda 2. In 1991, the third game in the series, A Link to the Past, pivoted back to the style of the original game while carrying over some ideas from Zelda 2. In a 1992 interview about the release of A Link to the Past, Miyamoto was asked if he had any ideas for the future of Zelda. He responded, "As for the next Zelda, if we go in order, it will probably be Super Nintendo Adventure of Link." As we discussed in the fourth season of this podcast, the fourth game in the series ended up being Link's Awakening. The project was started without approval by a small after-school club led by co-creator Takashi Tezuka, likely explaining why it didn't directly follow the style of Zelda 2. It would appear, however, that Miyamoto was not done with Zelda 2. Zelda team member Yoshiaki Koizumi revealed in an Iwata Asks interview that he was at one point making Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link in Polygon with Miyamoto. He said the project was intended for the Super Nintendo. He described a thin, polygon Link seen from the side and fighting with a sword. But, he said, we couldn't really bring Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link into form at that time, but I kept the desire to achieve a sword-fighting Zelda game. Miyamoto would bring Koizumi into the team that made Super Mario 64.
It's me, Mario!
Koizumi said he rejoined the Zelda team after finishing Super Mario 64. The timeline of all this is not entirely clear. Miyamoto said that there was an overlap between the two games. He told Nintendo Power in 1996, "I was also developing Zelda 64 while I was working on Super Mario 64, and I had a lot of ideas for Zelda. Since Mario was going to be released earlier, I used some of those ideas in it. I did the same thing when the Super Famicom versions of Zelda and Mario were being developed. I switched ideas between the two games." In an interview translated on Smubulations.com, Miyamoto said the development of Ocarina of Time took 3 whole years. That would place the start of the project sometime in 1995. Super Mario 64 was released in 1996, and as mentioned, Ocarina of Time would release in 1998. Yoshiaki Koizumi also talked about the parallel development between Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time. He said, "As we were making Super Mario 64, we were thinking about the Legend of Zelda the whole time. I would write down memos of what I wanted to achieve with the Legend of Zelda. Then when I started making the Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, I whipped out those memos and consulted them." Miyamoto is credited as producer and supervisor on the game. Zelda co-creator Takashi Tezuka is also listed as a supervisor. The game has 5 listed directors. They are script director Toru Osawa, who stated that he was also sort of a general director on the project. Yoshiaki Koizumi was the 3D system director and character designer. Toshio Iwawaki was the program director. Yoichi Yamada and Eiji Onuma are the game systems directors. Onuma is credited as Eiji Onizuka in the game. According to Wikipedia, this is his birth name. A Reddit thread claims he changed his surname after getting married. It's worth taking some time to talk about Onuma. This was his first time working on a Zelda game. From there, he quickly rose to become the head of the Zelda team and series producer, a role that he maintains to this day. According to Wikipedia, Onuma joined Nintendo in the late 80s after graduating from college. He had never played a video game before. Talking about how he came to join the Zelda team, Onuma said, "I spent a lot of time developing games with external companies, but I really wanted to develop inside Nintendo. I pestered Miyamoto-san about it, and he said, we don't have enough people for The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, so come on in for a spell." Of the 5 directors, Onuma said he was the last to join the team.